We're going. I normally do a countdown, but it's been a while, so I forgot to.
3, 2, oh, hi.
Hey, we're here. Let me get my feet out of my nose.
We're not wasting your time.
Right. Welcome to our life.
Just start it again?
Nah. Why don't you hit us with a nutshell?
All right. Hey, this is post-sermon conversation. So I preached yesterday, and so that would be 425. And it was the last of our Lion versus Lion series. We were in the month Victorious Lion. And specifically, how do we live alongside a victorious lion when we're still in this state of defeat, this fallen world? Like, we're not personally in a state of defeat, but it seems that way. And so we talked about the dynamic of, we started with Easter, and you have to keep dying to yourself. We talked about you have to view troubles the right way, that God's always using all the bad stuff to create beauty and power. And then last week, it's the idea of waiting, not panicking, really trusting in God and resting in God in the middle, because life will make you feel that way. So ended with mission. Like, why do you get up in the morning? What is your mission? And how is our mission affected by walking with the victorious lion? And so in my prep for this, I had just thought about it from a dozen different ways. But what occurred to me is that the Great Commission, I have been in contexts where they say the Great Commission all the time. And I just realized that for me, and I suspect many people, it is not life-giving. It feels burdensome. And it's like, and I illustrated it. I was out at West Texas, this last week, and you have these huge wide open spaces. And I know the people that live there love that. Like, that sense of wide open is such a blessing to them. But to me, it's frightening. Because all I think about is if my friends aren't here and I fall and break my leg, I will die out here alone, because there's nobody to yell for, and that's scary to me. And so my frame of reference makes the same thing not life-giving, And as I read it the first time to the congregation and just talked about, how does that make you feel? And how did God mean for it to make, how did Jesus want his apostles to feel? And we pointed out that they already been taught that apart from Jesus, they could do nothing. When they heard, in the text, sorry, that was a bug. That's not me just going, that's a new technique I'm using. Anyway, but they had in their mind, I am the vine, you're the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. They knew they could do nothing without Jesus saving them, rescuing them, empowering them. And he wasn't empowering them to go do the work on their own, because he'd been making that case all along that the only thing he did was what God told him to do, what the Spirit gave him the power to do. So when he gives that, we walk through every phrase, and again, trying to wrap it up clean, is this idea that Jesus delivered it to people that were doubting even in that moment. Jesus says, it's on me. It's not on you. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, and I will be with you to the end of the age. He wraps it up. He's saying, this is my work. But within my victory, here's what I want you to be doing. You're going to go about your daily life, and I want you to have in mind to be a disciple so that I can make disciples through you. Matter of fact, I'm saying it so much cleaner now than I did yesterday. We should just watch this, okay? But that's what the word means. It doesn't mean make disciples. It literally means, the verb form of methetes there is be a disciple to make a disciple. And so it's not about me powering up and having to have all the right answer to be an expert. It's, I'm being discipled by Jesus as a learner, a disciple, and I invite everyone in my world, hey, come alongside me and be a disciple with me. You're not my disciple. You're not studying at my feet. We're both studying at Christ's feet. And I think that's how they heard that. They never talk about come and study at Peter's feet. You know what I mean? Now, it's interesting. Paul says he studied at the feet of Gamaliel, but nobody ever says that people studied at Paul's feet. And I think that's because in the kingdom, it's different. I never thought about that before. Anyway, but then he's like, baptizing is this dynamic of constant death to self. And the big breakthrough for me this last week is realizing when he says, teaching them to obey everything I commanded you, I've been taught that's everything the Church of Christ believes. You got to go to this church at this time, in this special room, in this special way. And when you actually look at the only two times that Jesus say, I command something, it's in John 13 and John 15, where it says, I command you to love one another. And I know we tend to, then we'll go to the pendulum swing and say, well, that's all I got to do. No, because when you love one another, you'll do most, these things that Jesus tells you to do. You will do this in remembrance of me. You will work to love your enemies. But if you don't love God and love others, then even when you try to love your enemies, you're doing it by your own power and you're going to fail. And that's not what the Great Commission calls us to. It's saying participate in the work that God's already doing. And so anyway, I thought God was really teaching me all week. I actually delivered a very similar sermon on Wednesday night at Sudan Church of Christ, which was not recorded if people are tracking that. But they gave me 50 minutes. And so I was a little scared. And I don't honestly know how long I took, but I know it wasn't 50 minutes or else I would have heard about it. So anyway, but yeah, that was where I was at yesterday. You're muted.
Hate it when I do that. When airplanes go over, I hit the mute and then telling myself, I won't forget this time. You started off with mentioning that you were speaking for 50 minutes in Sudan. And I think that gives you life to have 50 minutes. And that would scare me for them to.
Oh, really?
And I don't mind doing it on accident, but thinking 50 minutes, that doesn't give me the life that I think that it gives.
Right. Well, it is kind of funny in when I first the first real opportunity to teach on a regular basis was working with AIM. And we started with 2-hour classes, like 2 50-minute class blocks, one right after the other. And certainly teaching is different than preaching in some ways. But the way I taught then, I was basically preaching for 50 minutes twice in a row. And so, and it was painful, but to do that twice a week or even 4 times a week for several years, it just changes the feel. It's all perspective, but yeah, so it was a messier sermon, I think, for anybody that was there at Sudan, because I had so much more time, I would linger longer on points. So it wasn't as clean, which actually bugged me after a while, not for my sake, but for their sake. I was like, oh man, I probably could have, if I'd sharpened this, I could do it in 30 and nobody's going to be like, excuse me, we paid for 50. Right. So anyway, but honestly, it wasn't until Wednesday that I realized, oh wait, I've had 50 whole, it just didn't really even cross my mind, the difference and then on Sunday, it cracked me up, honestly. So.
Well, the thing that you didn't mention about yesterday's sermon, that one of the things that was high on my list of, man, this is something I want to look at more, was the idea of the supposed to, the checklist. So say that part if you can, because you could, and then I want to put something on the table.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, the reason I didn't say it is I didn't plan to say it.
Oh, yeah. And
then I was just saying it and I'm like, this is really good. I've never thought about it. And what was interesting to me, and I don't know how it was to be in the audience, of course, but I started to do this almost like I'd done it before, where I would go like a check mark, supposed to, how this, I just kept doing this like repetitively. And I hadn't practiced that or even thought about it before. And so the spirit is, you had said 2-3 weeks ago on Easter Sunday, you had said, look, if you gather together as a church and I'm preaching, this is you talking about, and all you experience is religion, that's on me. That there's part of it that I am not dying to myself and I'm trying to create my own thing, the spiritual scaffolding that I'm trying to create. And that's true. If I'm not dying to myself, there's going to be a misfire or a lack of reaching the potential, but it's also true for everybody there. And so that's just been on my mind. And so another way to say that is, if you come together because you're supposed to, you're checking the box, that is not just, okay, that is a huge problem for you. I mean, huge problem. And the way I said it, I remember saying it is, if you're only here because you are saying I'm supposed to, it'd be better for you to leave right now. It'd be so much better, and go away from attending church right now and say, God, what is it you want me to do? because supposed to, and I didn't say this yesterday, but supposed to is a corollary or a practice of lukewarm Christianity. And Jesus is very specific in Revelation that it's parabolic in the sense that he's literally not physically spitting you out of his mouth, but he's saying, I'd rather you hot or cold. And you've said this many times to me, Tim. We don't really believe that. We believe it's better to be warm than to be cold. But in that context, Jesus is saying, look, I would rather you be totally committed to me or not committed to me. And that raises another question, which we don't have to address here, but why would he want that is a good question. Why would he want us cold rather than warm? But he's very explicit, like oddly explicit. You know, you phoning something in, you checking in. It's not like, I'm not saying you do that one time and you're out, but we tend to get into a rhythm of holding other people responsible for our growth in Christ. And why don't you make me grow? Or you're not feeding me enough or well enough. And I'm just like, that's not a biblical concept.
Well, the thing that came up for me was because it sounds so anti-Jesus to say, go somewhere else. But it is exactly Jesus's words. When the Pharisees were picking at the disciples and basically saying, how can Jesus hang out with these type of people? And Jesus's response was, go. And I think that there are two times in scripture, like one is the Great Commission, go. But the other time is when he says to the Pharisees, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And so there's this, and I hadn't connected it to the hot and cold, but I think that's there. I think, are you hot? Then go make disciples. And you've made a really great point to say the word go, no, make. Well, the idea of as you are going, make disciples.
Right.
Versus, are you cold? Go learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And it does seem like a piece of that is Jesus saying, if you're just lukewarm, you're messing up the temperature of the hot. And simultaneously, the go and learn what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Go see what it's like to learn that with me, not in the picture. Go see what it's like to find mercy when I'm there, because you're going to find out you need mercy. And then come to me and see if I don't give you rest. So I thought when you, and it's now I think it's interesting that you didn't plan to say that, but I thought that was such a powerful, very godly, very Jesus thing to say. Go, leave this place and find out what God is wanting to call you into.
Yeah, that was really a spirit lead. And man, that's helping me right there. That deal. And you know, that's where Jesus used those words, go and learn. But it's a funny dynamic that when we look to our ministers, maybe our elders, it just depends on the way a church is set up. But we think, okay, those are the people I watch to see what Jesus is like. We may not say it that way, but that's kind of how it is. And that's why we get so disappointed when our leaders are, you know, big, consistent, habitual sin is discovered or very hurtful sin is discovered, you know, because there's the assumption they're more like Jesus. Now, I don't know if that's a good assumption or a safe assumption, but that is the assumption. And then so basically saying, okay, Tim, I want you to be a representative of Jesus in my life. And Tim, you're like, okay. And then I go, and then you go, hey, I need you to serve in this way. And like, well, my dad's funeral's that day. And then you say, well, go and let the dead bury the dead. You follow me. All of a sudden I'm like, who the heck are you? So, and understand, I'm not Jesus, you're not Jesus. But the point there is we would be a lot more offended. We would be in the Pharisee seat, I don't know, 10 times more than we think we would.
Yeah.
When we really see Jesus in action, because we still have a God in our mind that acts just like us, just a little bit better. You know, of course, God would want what I want, you know? And when you actually, I just, sometimes I think, man, do people actually read the Gospels? And I felt this way for years and years. And not that I'm an expert, but it's like they present Jesus as all kinds of stuff that Jesus isn't. And Jesus was gentle. How do I say this? Jesus was not accommodating. When gentleness was required, he would be gentle, but he was not accommodating. And I mean, I think most Christians would be so offended by Jesus a lot. I'm just saying, go back and put yourself in the place of the apostles. I'm not even talking about new information, but I think if Jesus were walking with us physically right now, we would be shocked about what he didn't invest in that we just assume he should.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what point of view you take. I believe you'd be shocked. I believe I'd be shocked. Like there's things I just would be like, whoa, that's how we're going to do this. Because we just kind of take the words and then we make them, we turn it up for us. Here's how I would do it, but Jesus would do it just a little bit superior to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how much of it is just him continually making the point of you are either following God or you're not. And so it's become a part of our vernacular now to talk about the chairs. But yesterday, I think you standing up on those chairs, especially knowing the Heims may not know what you're talking about, and you are standing over them. And I always love it when you make the point, if you fall off, we'll never forget it. Because I was imagining them like, but because it seems so unstable to step up right there, it just seemed like it was doubling down on the point. But yeah, to imagine Jesus walking in today's world, and you and I were talking about this earlier today. One of the things that I find myself just losing interest in our post-sermon conversation for myself, losing energy, I guess, to do it, is that constant feeling of I am one comment away from alienating half of the church. And you've mentioned this conversation that we have is probably our most vulnerable, would you say? Is that what you've said?
Yeah.
And it feels like I am one comment away from saying what I think about something and half the church being angry. And if I clean it up, then cleaning it up, I will make the other half of the church angry. And so it just feels frustrating. It feels, and I'm not saying the church is like this. I'm saying this is the story I tell myself.
Right.
That if I say something wrong, that's it. And the scary thing for me here is and I don't want to be wrong. Okay. I want to be right. But if I am wrong, there's this sense of an apology isn't going to fix it. We're moved past that in society now. You're just wrong, and so you're done.
Right.
And so there's this sense of grossness about that.
Yeah.
And I have no idea why I'm going down this trail now, because it started with standing on those. Jesus, if he were walking amongst us now, I think he would double down on, if you are a Republican, if you are standing on Republican values, he would hit you hard at where you are not standing on God.
That's right.
And if you are a Democrat and standing on Democrat values, he would hit you hard in where you are not standing on God. And I feel like, so if you're listening to this and you can't imagine how he would hit you hard, then we probably ought to have a really good discussion. Because there is not one party that is following Christ and the other one just doesn't see it. There are huge holes in everybody's thinking. And now saying that, there are huge holes in my thinking. If I were to start a political party and have people that agreed with me, then I would immediately have huge blind spots of trying to keep my platform up instead of trying to keep God up.
Well, I'll tell you, man, there's so much you said there. Let me work backward. Yeah, part of the thing is humans want constancy. We want consistency. And so whatever platform you had today, and it's the same for church planting.
Yeah.
You and I both have rubbed shoulders, and you even have been a church planter. And, so it's a constant conversation of, okay, if we were going to start a church, you can only emphasize so much. You just only have so many hours in the day, so much energy. And so you got to, what's the most important, and work out from there. And the rub is humans want constancy. Anytime you change something in church, there's this sense like that is a doctrinal change, which almost always means something that happens on Sunday morning. If it happens any other time, nobody cares, which there again, that shows where our hearts are at. If I'm getting upset about 1 hour of the week and I'm going to leave this church for 1 hour of the week, I really need to ask myself, am I even part of Jesus' church? If that 1 hour of the week totally defines everything, or if I'm just part of some group that gets together, but that's another thing. But the dynamic is because we are addicted to constancy. We've even had people say to us, the whole world is changing. I want my church to stay the same, which means don't learn, don't grow. Because in order to grow and learn, you have to change. We see this in our own lives. If you at one point were like, I will never use a computer, or now maybe we're like, I will never use TikTok. Well, if TikTok persists, if you don't know what TikTok is, sorry, these short videos, but if TikTok persists for the next 30 years and you don't use it, you will miss a huge section of the culture, because it will become more and more integrated. And I think this dynamic of refusing to learn, I think it dominates the churches I've been associated with. Good people, going to heaven people, loving Jesus people, but a refusal to learn and staying constancy. And that's why political platforms can't persist, because they can't keep up with Christ, because Christ is always growing, always teaching, rather, always learning, always wanting to show us how infinite God's wisdom and beauty and power and creativity is. And we always say, no. We just want to do it the way we did it yesterday. Yeah. And God's patient with us, but that's why no platform, because every platform is built on a desire to be constancy. You know what I mean? We always had these rules. And so that already is working against. I'm not even talking about the corruption that comes with power. And it is true. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. I just don't know somebody that's been given a good amount of power that they don't struggle at least. Yeah. With it. To what you said about that, we're one statement away from have half the congregation be mad at us. That you're not making that up. You and I both know we have some of the same friends that were fired over basically one statement. Yeah. And everybody loved them 5 minutes before they made that statement. And then once they made that statement, they were done. I mean, I do a podcast with a guy that lost his job over one sentence. He was a youth pastor. I mean, it's just like ministers are in a really weird spot, especially Church of Christ ministers, because we have nobody to appeal to. Yeah. If we get fired, we're fired. You know what I mean? And we're self-employed. And so it's not it takes a lot of courage to get up and tell the truth the best you can, and Memorial has a much more absorbing culture than any I've ever been a part of, a much more grace-centered posture. But I will say this yesterday. So I at the end, I go, there are 2 times. I said, do you know how many times it says that Jesus commanded in the New Testament? And before I said it, David Himes, David, if you're watching this, you're the hero of this show. So David is the one I stood up and he was right there. And I didn't even think about that they were right under me effectively. Keep in mind, I wasn't standing on their armrest. I was standing in the pew in front of them. So I don't want to be too weird about that. But anyway, but David immediately raises his hand and goes, 2. Okay. Now I was thinking 2, but do you know what I thought immediately? Oh, I pray, God, I pray that we have the same 2. Uh-huh. Literally, I immediately said, God, please let us have the same 2, because if he has a different 2, what's going to happen? And I think David's a nice man. I don't know him well. He's new to our congregation, but I had to quell my own fear, because every Church of Christ minister knows you're about one statement away from getting fired, no matter how good everything's been up to a minute before that. And I don't know, most jobs, yes, you can get fired anytime, but there's usually some kind of recourse. Unemployment. I mean, I know preachers have been fired on the spot, no new payment, no severance, no nothing,
Yeah.
and you only have to know that happened to one guy to think it could happen to me, so it's not like you're making that up,
Yeah. And honestly, I don't even think, maybe I should, but I don't think in terms of getting fired. I think in terms of uh, being that guy on social media that is now the poster child of everything that's wrong with X. Can you
Right.
believe my preacher said this? Like that's
Right.
I don't have the energy. Um, I don't have the energy to argue.
Yeah.
If you don't agree with me, I and I don't. And I feel like in this culture today, um, if you argue, you're just digging a hole. But at the same time, I don't want to apologize for something that's wrong. And at the other end, if I am wrong and I do apologize, I'm already telling myself nobody cares.
Mhm.
There's no forgiveness.
Right.
So it is too hard to. Oh man, it's too hard to never be wrong. And
Mhm.
this is revealing my own work here. Because I saw this in a friend of mine who's a preacher that talked about or has mentioned recently uh, feeling like he grew up in Pharisee training school, and now he, as a preacher, he is so nervous about saying anything wrong. And as he's talking, it's not hard for me to imagine, oh, if you are so worried about this, you are perpetuating the culture because you are teaching your congregants that you know everything and that you are always right. And that is so unhealthy. So it 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 is so important for a church culture, um, for you and I to be illustrating that we are often wrong and not hiding from it and owning it drastically. So I'm saying both parts of this are real in my head.
Mhm.
And a couple of weeks ago, I feel like you referred to me owning. If you come to church and you feel like it's religious and not life giving, you aren't mistaking
Mhm.
because I don't want to die to myself. So I feel like we do our share of owning our mistakes, but at the same time, it feels like uh, there are some mistakes we can't make.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm going to clean this up. I want to make sure this is clear to anybody that be listening. It's not that I live in fear of being fired. Like Memorial is the most grace-centered place, like I said,
Yeah.
and I feel they, in my estimation, they've been more than fair with people that have left Memorial, for in a variety of situations. What I'm talking about is that initial fear, that subconscious that just grips you
Mhm.
when these things come up,
Yeah.
and I mean, clearly, if I say, "Hey, Tim, want to talk about Black Lives Matter?" All of a sudden, it's like, you better not. You know what I mean? It's not like I want to talk about Black Lives Matter, but and what am I even talking about? You know what I mean? Now I've said it. Now it's super controversial because I literally said those three words. And I think that just illustrates the challenge we have. And I'm going to take it back to the thematic of Sunday. This idea of we live in this defeated, this fallen world, and the devil wants us to feel like it is inevitable that it will go wrong, you know and this is what we're even discussing right now, is one of his tools that he uses against us. And sometimes church members are complicit with the devil's scheme and jump on that thing of yeah, this minister said something wrong, and they're out. And sometimes they're not. And obviously it's much better when I'm, as a member, when I'm not complicit, with the devil's scheme there. um but still, the devil's trying to work it any way he can to convince us that God's way does not work. And the reason I'm very confident in that is that's exactly what he did with Adam and Eve. That's exactly what he's trying to do with Job. Job, do you not see? You've been serving God. His way does not work. Even Peter, Jesus says, he's been given permission to sift you like wheat. Now, I don't know everything that goes into sifting like wheat, but it's a dramatic process that is trying to separate something. Well, what is the devil trying to separate? Peter from Jesus, Peter trusting in Jesus, Peter believing that God had a plan in this, and that's just his mode. That's what the devil does. And I think this is the dynamic that Memorial, and I believe other churches are working on, is to creating a place that really normalizes exactly what you're saying, that Jesus is the head of this church, not the preacher, not the elders, not the pastors, not the whoever. Jesus is the head. We are going to do everything we can in our power to live lives of integrity and honesty and intelligence and creativity and beauty, but we understand if you're here to sit at the feet of a human, it's okay. It's okay to be encouraged by that, but you realize the good you're getting is from God and God's spirit. It's not that human. And so it turns down the volume on if mistakes are made. And I'm not talking about like I mispronounced the name, but let's say for argument's sake, you've got a question 1 minute away that's like, Jason, what about these 17 times that in the King James version, Jesus says, I command you, and you looked in the NIV, which I actually looked in the Greek, but still, if you found it, I'd be like, oh, okay, I guess I was wrong about that, but I feel really blessed to be part of a place that we could do that.
Yeah.
But still in the back of my mind, there's that, it's almost like you light a fuse and it's like, that fear that runs through you.
Yeah. And this is ironic to me that the conversation is about being learners. The point of this is to remember, hey, you are a learner learning with learners. And my fear is being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those things don't fit together.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be learning going on in a community with learners.
Mm-hmm.
When there's probably a greater application for us, but when we create a learning environment where it's a one-on-one, not one-on-one, when it's an alone learning, it's safer. But iron sharpening iron is risky, painful, and so good.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that because of our intentional pursuit of dialego, of that idea of examining things and wanting to hear the other side, not seeking to defend, even if that's a natural part of maybe our personality, or we were raised like the person in your story that was raised to be a Pharisee. And I can certainly relate to that dynamic where we just think we've got to protect God, or at least under the guise of protecting God, we slam down anything that feels somewhat different than the way we would do it or the way we would say it. It's ironic sometimes. I've listened to people over the years, and at the core, they're not in disagreement, but they're saying it different. Mm-hmm. But they refuse to listen to each other. And if somebody doesn't intervene or they don't drop their guard, they will walk away believing they are not brothers in Christ.
Yeah.
Because they refuse to listen, that they're saying the exact same thing in a different way. Yeah. And then if you're thinking something in a different way, I mean, again, I think people could hear this and say, whoa, you're really cutting edge. No. I mean, Paul says in Philippians 3, all of us who are mature should take such a view of things. And if on some point you think differently, that too, God will make clear to you. Only let us as individuals live up to what we've already attained. Yeah. I mean, it's not like we're like some cutting edge doctrine shop here. It's like the Bible already says we're going to learn different pace, and what I'm responsible to is the part that I grasp. So if you have a hold of a doctrine, man, I just can't get there. My job isn't to correct you. My job is to let you live up to what you've attained and me to live what I've attained, and trust that God will teach both of us. But we've been taught, man, and it's funny because the lines aren't clearly drawn. Like it's like Dave Buchanan brought that up. I'll know it when I see it, kind of dynamic. Like, it's like, well, what can we, is there any limitation on this? No. And then you see it and you're like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Well, why? Well, that's always been our rule. And you're like, well, 20 minutes. you didn't 20 minutes ago, you didn't have it, and it's, as our culture changes, that rule-based mentality, it just hasn't been able to keep up because it was never meant to keep up.
Yeah.
Rules are supposed to come as a function of our relationship, not as the cause of the relationship. And that's where so much cart before the horse on this. And the point though, in all that is, we're not trying to, say some innovative new doctrine. We're saying, if you actually look at the Bible, this is what's been said all along, but it kind of got washed away because we had to keep what our grandparents told us or our great grandparents told us.
Well, and you said earlier in this conversation, if it's all about that 1 hour a week, what does that say about your relationship?
Right.
And I remember, man, I think this came from a Beth Moore study a decade ago. Maybe I'm assigning it to the wrong place, but she made the point of the Tower of Babel, where God said, "Go, be fruitful and multiply, go into all the earth." And they arrived at a place where they said, "Nope, we're coming together, and we're building something that makes us look good."
Right.
And so God confused their language so that they would scatter again. And this tracks with, no, we're not going to go anymore. We are going to come together, and we're going to tell people, for you to get to know God, you got to come to us.
Wow.
And God confuses our language. And I remember sitting with, man, I love my time preaching in Amherst, Texas, because I got to have breakfast often with the Methodists and the Baptist preachers. And the Methodists loved to debate, but more out of sport. Like, it was really fun to him, and it was fun to him to see the Baptist pastor get upset. And I didn't enjoy any of it. And so I wouldn't engage. Like, I would just kind of sit as a spectator, and I enjoyed watching a social experiment happen in front of me. But after a while, what I realized was we were all three saying the same thing when it came to baptism, but they wouldn't use my words for it. And since they wouldn't use my words for it, we couldn't have fellowship. And that idea of, when we decide not to go, but we decide to build something, everybody's got to come to us, it seems like our language gets confused.
Right.
And we so easily pick at, well, you've got to say it this way. You've got to present it this way. You have to do it the exact same way. And I don't know if there's just a dynamic there of, so we scatter, or if that's God's provision. I don't know.
Yeah. To me, there's a whole book there. What you just said, that really, that idea of, they were told to go and spread out, multiply, and the next thing you know, they're all collected and trusting in their own selves. Man, I that really is convicting, because, and that's one of the reasons why I said this in the gospel meeting several times, and it's true everywhere. There is not a funnel of God's power over your church building. God's power is, you have access to God everywhere, and we should come together to celebrate his power, not to feel like, woo, I'm finally able to tap into his power. There is nothing sacred about the building or the special room, no matter what we name it. And I think it really causes a lot more problems than we think. I really do. I honestly think, God is really, if we truly believed the Cine, the command, example, necessary inference, model of interpretation, nobody would own a church building. Nobody would, because it's completely not mentioned, which we're told that means it's forbidden, based on the same logic. We don't have instruments in worship. It wasn't said, so it's forbidden. Well, there's a lot of things that weren't said that we've added, but we feel perfectly justified in because of expediency, which is, to me, it's the biggest cop out, But anyway, that dynamic of when I elevate something to a place that God said, I'm not elevating it there, I think we are really blind to the danger and the damage it does, And I think what you're saying of, why did they create the Tower of Babel? Why would you be fixated? I mean, they want to get up to where God is, so that's part of it, but also is to get above floodwaters, to build a tower so the flood wouldn't destroy you, so you'd have someplace to go other than God. And I wonder if our church it's scary to be with God. I mean, throughout the whole of the Bible, the people were scared to be close to God. Moses, you be our go-between. We don't want to talk to him, and so it's really concerning, and I get it. And God's like, yeah, you do need to fear me. And then I will drive out all fear if you enter into my love. Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I've never heard that before, but it really resonates. Really does with me.
So to any Memorial people still listening to this that haven't decided to fire us.
Sure.
I'm joking about that. I just want to do a plug for when in small groups, when we say, hey, what did you hear from God this week? This all ties together. Like Jesus saying, my mother and my brothers, my family are those who hear my words and put them into practice. That is what we are going for. We're trying to recreate a culture that says we are each responsible for listening to Christ.
That's right.
It is just not hard to imagine how things would go sour if the church's view of listening to God is to listen to what the preacher has heard all week.
Right.
It's just not hard to imagine that Christ would be saying, this is not what I've called you to. I have called my mother and my brothers are those who will hear my words and put them into practice. And so we as a people need to each take responsibility for listening to God. And so our small groups is one, I don't want to say baby step because I feel like that dismisses it, but it is one step towards, hey, I'm owning that it is a part of my discipleship.
Yeah, I think, what's interesting, that I just was looking it up earlier, and it literally means there in Matthew 28:19, it's the idea of properly to transport, to move something from one destination to another. So what is it you're moving? It's moving your own discipleship. It's moving that relationship with God wherever you're going. You know what I mean? But the emphasis is you're taking something with you. Now, right before that, he said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. I'm just putting this together even as we speak based on something you said earlier. All authority has been in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and transport that. As you're going in your life, you're transporting that authority as you are a disciple, meaning Jesus is the authority and he's my teacher, you know what I mean? And you will affect other people to be disciples. And you will have the opportunity, as you die to yourself in front of them, they will die to themselves, to invite them into that death to themselves so that you can teach them to obey the greatest command, which will then lead them to apply the greatest command in ways that fully honor the fullness of the New Testament. And I'm with you always. I mean, that is the essence of the Great Commission. And when I say it that way, I'm like, yeah. But when I say it like, I was at a youth rally once. This kind of sums up. It was the most brazen, but it sums up. I was going to share this yesterday, but I didn't have time. I was at a youth rally once for about 500 kids-ish. And so there were about 25 youth groups. And the speaker goes out, and I knew the speaker, and I know his heart's good, but anyway, you'll make your own judgment. So he gets the mic and he goes out into the crowd and he says, I want to know how many, it's like September. And he goes, I want to know how many people your church baptized this year. Raise your hand. And he'd come to one and be like, we baptized one person. Oh, who's got more? Who's got more? We baptized 5 people. Who's got more? Who's got more? And the guy said, we baptized 12 people last year. And he's like, I ain't asking about last year. I'm asking about right now. Who's got more? Who's got more? And I'm like, you have made this the ugliest thing. Ain't nobody in this room responsible for those salvations. And if they are, they weren't really salvations. It's all about the Holy Spirit, and you made it about the work of men. And when I think about that, I'm like, that's what we've done to the Great Commission. It's all on you. and you better have a good track record. And here's the other thing. What have you done for me lately? It doesn't matter, and if you did a great thing 10 years ago. And I think that's why a lot of people, as they age in churches, they get depressed and they get bitter because they know their physical energy is diminishing, their opportunity is diminishing, and they're not producing the way they used to, and they feel terrible about themselves. And that's not everybody, but every church I've been to, I've seen it. Yeah. And so this dynamic, and I go on and on, but this dynamic of seeing something that is beautiful as ugly, we have to keep looking into it. If there's some command of God that we're like, oh, that's awful, it's oppressive, it's ugly, we need to be asking God, why is that? Did somebody teach me the wrong lyrics to the song, the wrong melody to the song that makes it ugly? That I need to go back and say, okay, God, will you help me unlearn and really learn what it is to walk with you in this passage, in this truth?
Yeah, I was listening to Dusty's sermon, not yesterday's, but the week before. He really made this beautiful point of nothing can separate us from the love of God. And it was really sad. His illustration was a conversation he had with somebody that week that they didn't see eye to eye on something. And the person's trump card was, well, whenever you stand before God, and basically I wouldn't want to stand before God with your opinion on this. Mm-hmm. And he was like, whoa, that's the card you want to play right now? And it was as if that person had completely forgotten, and nothing can separate you from the love of God. Mm-hmm. As if this teaching error could. And it does seem like we don't grasp the whole of Scripture. We don't let the whole of Scripture land with us at the Great Commission.
Yeah.
Nothing can separate you from the love of God, though we feel like if I don't have the numbers, that could. That
right.
Neither height nor depth, but numbers may.
Right. Oh man, I will say this. When a person responds in some way like what you're describing, I think to myself, you don't agree with Jesus, that the greatest command is love God, and the second greatest command is just like love others. Yeah. You believe that having doctrinal purity, as you define it, is the biggest command, and love is something secondary.
Yeah.
And the way, when I say that to people, that happens, they're like, no, this is the way I love you. And I'm like, well, is that the way God loves you? When you get something wrong, that he's like, man, you need to start dreading facing me unless you tell me, the truth. Outside of Jesus Christ as Lord, you know what I mean? And again, we could reference scriptures where he's talking about you are a learner.
Yeah.
But by saying, no, I've got this absolutely right, you're simultaneously saying, I refuse to learn anymore about it. Yeah. Even God is the creator of the earth. I learn stuff about that all the time that changes the way I think about that, and it's something I believed forever, but it's something that I believe differently all the time.
Yeah.
Because he keeps teaching me. So
I had somebody correct me one time because I mentioned something. Well, you and I differ on a few theological points. And it was like he leaned in and was like, hey, did you mean to say doctrine? And I was like, well, and he goes, because doctrine and theology are two very different things. Like, I think you and I believe in the same God. Like, if you're talking theology, you and I believe in the same God. We may not agree on everything doctrinally. And as he was unpacking that, I realized, I've equated the two. Mm-hmm. Like in my past, if you don't agree with me doctrinally, then theology doesn't even matter. And it was a wake-up call to me to say, are we agreeing on the same God? Mm-hmm. And honestly, it makes me more questioning, okay, so then what do I do with people who differ from me theologically? Like, if they don't believe the Holy Spirit is alive today, should I put up barriers, or not barriers, but should I distance myself? And part of me feels like no, because what if they believe what I believed 40 years ago?
Mhm.
I feel like God has grace on 8-year-old Timmy.
Mhm.
So does he have grace on them? But it is a bigger question in my mind of, hey, theology really does matter. And not that doctrine doesn't, but it has its place.
That's it. And that's the thing, is that we've equated things that aren't equal. And it's not like the church is cornering the market on that. This happens all the time. It just also happens in our discussions. And I think the safeguard is the learner posture.
Yeah.
It's me saying, you know what, I may be one phone call away from thinking, ooh, what I just said in this recording, that's not accurate. Like I need to really grow in that,
Yeah.
and that's the spirit of it to me. Well, thank you, man.
Yeah.
I'm sensitive to our audience, the 6 that are left.
Right.
Just kidding.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate these conversations sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly say I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. And I always appreciate our conversations. I don't always appreciate how I show up at the conversations. That's the distinction I should.
I get you. We'll see you next week.
All right. Blessings.
Bye.